Hope everyone's having an awesome Sunday. So, it's getting hot in here in Arizona. I think we're eclipsing 90 degrees. I feel like it's already 95. Yeah, that's how my Sunday's going. Anyway, super interesting topic. If you're just joining us, we're talking about the Kesha and Dr. Luke defamation lawsuit. And this case has a lengthy history. Very, very complicated history. This is not something that just happened. I mean, Dr. Luke, who's a producer, right? I think most of you probably know who the characters are in this story. Dr. Luke is a relatively well-known record producer and publisher, and works with many female artists, including at one point Lady Gaga and Kelly Clarkson. I think he also worked with the Black Eyed Peas. I think he also worked with John Legend, and he is a super connected record agent. And this story involves many different characters, not the least of which is Kesha. And Kesha, whom you all know, is a top of the charts singer, and she is embroiled in a lawsuit over two things, essentially, really. Sexual allegations, meaning whether Dr. Luke sexually assaulted Kesha, and number two, related to that, whether she defamed him to other people when she told them that Dr. Luke was a sexual abuser and that she had been abused and that other people had been abused as well. Specifically, she alleged in a text message to Lady Gaga that, hey, Katy Perry is a victim of sexual assault by this guy as well, in addition to me. There's the other issue, actually, I guess so it's three issues. There's her contract, right? The rights to her record contract, essentially. And this goes back all the way to almost, 2005 or 2006, the allegations. And, at that time, Kesha's a new artist. She's about 18 years old. And I don't think I'll go through the whole history. Maybe we'll do it again. Maybe we'll do this in a series. But this is a lengthy story. It didn't just all of a sudden happen recently. Basically, Kesha was signed with Dr. Luke's label, and then at some point went with another label, and then jumped back to Dr. Luke, and she really left a bad taste in the mouth of both labels. At one point, the former label, DAS, I think it was, DAS, they actually sued for, I think it was $14 million. They sued Kesha for $14 million for royalty payments that she owed them, and I think she paid half of it. But the point is that she claims for many, many years, the first probably 5, 6, 7 years of her career, that she didn't get the credit she was owed for many of her productions, including, she was featured on, I don't know if you guys remember this, but in 2009, this, singer Flo Rida had the song Right Around, and it featured Kesha's vocals. And she claims that, she got minimal creative rights in that, and she had minimum royalties paid to her from that, which I thought was super interesting. But anyway, this dispute goes all the way back to that time, right? So the allegations going back to 2005 when she was 18, and not to get into the gritty details, but basically Kesha says that Dr. Luke, the rape allegation starts from Dr. Luke allegedly giving her some sort of a drug, some sort of pill, hallucinogenic pill, and that she was taken advantage of and woke up naked in Dr. Luke's hotel room after this party at Nikki Hilton's house in Hollywood. Something like that. And she doesn't say anything about it because she feels compelled. She's in a tough position because he's a record producer. He's the one who actually controls her label and her rights. And if she said anything, it could be the end of her career, according to her. So she was compelled not to say anything. But what's really, really, really interesting, and I didn't know this till I really started digging, in the lawsuit by DAS or DAS against Kesha for $14 million in unpaid commissions, many people are deposed, right? Certainly, Kesha is deposed. And in that lawsuit, the question arose as to whether she had ever been assaulted or involved sexually with Dr. Luke. And she testified in that case, this is 2011, that Dr. Luke never made sexual advances at me. How does she get out of that now? What are her arguments? Well, her arguments through her lawyer are that, her safety and livelihood were threatened. Not hard to imagine. Not hard to imagine, because if you think about it, this guy is a high-powered, record label manager. He's got his own label, in fact, and he's holding the rights to her next several productions, right? And so she kind of is in a bind. And if she does say anything, and if she does come out, certainly there is a possibility of significant career repercussions. I could understand that if this in fact did happen, that somebody could threaten somebody and say, if you come out and tell anybody, this is the end of your career. I could see that. That's her argument, today, as to why in 2011 she testified that Dr. Luke had not made any sexual advances against her. Anyway, so during that time where she's testifying against Dr. Luke, she's still under contract with this guy. And so from that point, 2011 to date, it seems like a significant amount of effort from Kesha and her legal team is spent on getting out of that contract. That she doesn't have enough creative rights, she's not getting paid enough, she had a better deal at DAS or other record labels, and she just needs to have her own independent opportunity away from these guys, particularly from Dr. Luke. And so, she goes, and fast forward to 2014, right? So from 2011, 2012, there were some tweets that Kesha made that she was, forced to sing certain lyrics like Die Young in 2012, and that those weren't her, creative endeavors. And she starts, posting these tweets about this. And then it's in 2014 where the actual litigation sort of starts, right? And so she, Kesha checks herself into a rehab facility for about 30 days to treat an eating disorder. And that's when, I think during that time, she tells her therapist that she was sexually assaulted by Dr. Luke. And she filed a lawsuit against Dr. Luke in California. And this is there's a series of litigation, right? This is not one lawsuit. There's, Kesha files suit in California, and she's suing for assault and battery related to the, to the sexual misconduct related to the rape. And, she's basically saying I have long-term emotional and psychological abuse from this. And, she's requesting that she should be released from her record deal because she said that it was a breach of the good faith and fair dealing requirement that she was, abused like this, and that for that reason, Dr. Luke didn't hold up his end of the bargain of the contract and she should be released. That's her argument in the 2014 lawsuit. Luke filed his own countersuit in New York, and he sues her in New York because I think there was a choice of law provision in the contract. I'm not sure, but she gets sued in New York by Dr. Luke, and that's when his counterclaims for defamation start to ripen. And in fact, he sued Kesha's mother, who apparently writes lyrics as well and has written many of her songs, and sued her manager, Jack Rovner, for defamation. And, in that lawsuit, he clearly denies any sexual allegation, right? Because if you're suing somebody for publishing that you raped someone, then as part of that lawsuit, the defamation portion of it, you would have to disprove, somebody's going to argue truth as a defense, right? So you're suing somebody for rape, they're coming back and saying it's true, and you would have to naturally try to defend or show evidence that, in fact, this conduct never occurred. So that's the context in which that's happening in New York, meanwhile. And she's gone on the radio and she's gone on Twitter saying that this stuff actually happened. This continues to 2015. In 2015, Kesha actually sued Sony as well as part of that lawsuit. And Kesha unfortunately had a rough history in California with her litigation. And a judge basically says, listen, I'm questioning your contract claims. And I don't see, her claim was that this is an interference with my contract. This is in bad faith. I need to get out of it. It's not working out real great. So she files a separate action in New York now. And if you're not confused already, it's getting even hairier. She files a separate preliminary injunction in New York related to the contract, basically saying, I'm going to suffer from irreparable harm. I was sexually abused. So she is tying that together. She's tying the sex assault and the contract together because she definitely wants out of this contract. She feels like she was, forced to be in it. She was taken advantage of. And so she should be able to get out of it. Sony speaks out, and Sony said in that litigation that, hey, we're caught in the crossfire. And, Sony also said, because Kesha sued them in 2015, that her suit was a quote-unquote transparent and misguided attempt to renegotiate her contracts. Ouch. This is Sony is huge, right? We all know. And to call her out like that in litigation, in public record, related to a serious allegation of sexual assault, I mean, that's horrible. But that is what happened. 2016, right? We're still going here. So Luke's defamation lawsuit against Kesha, against her mom, I think her name is PB. I don't know if I'm saying that right. And her manager is dismissed. Basically, there's a jurisdiction issue. And this happens, right? Where to sue somebody for defamation, whether you can drag somebody into the appropriate jurisdiction to be sued is always a question that judges can determine, and they can dismiss the entire lawsuit for personal jurisdiction, essentially at any point, even through a judgment. In federal court, particularly, this does happen. And so, it just gets uglier and uglier. 2016, she loses the injunction. She's not getting anywhere in her New York lawsuit to be released from her contract. So she's doubling down now on her sex assault claims. This is where this hashtag free Kesha starts. It's all over Twitter. It's all over social media. Kesha's lawyers, again, they're arguing that this is all illusory. Judges are saying there's no irreparable harm. Again, related to her contract claim. So at this point, she's pushing really hard to get out of her contracts. And she's using the sex assault as a basis to do that. Okay, that's her lawsuit in New York. And there were, look, in 2016, I distinctly remember this, and as I was reading to refresh my recollection on this, it was even crazier how many people actually came out and supported her. And I think Taylor Swift donated $250,000 to assist with her legal bills, right? And many producers came out and actually gave her a shout out. I know Lady Gaga met with Kesha and showed her public support. And of course, Lady Gaga has an important role in this story as well, as we're going to talk about, since she's the one who received the text message from Kesha, right? Kesha and Lady Gaga were text messaging, and that's where Kesha says that, Dr. Luke did this to Katy Perry as well. We'll talk about that in a minute. But this is now getting all over Twitter. This is getting everywhere. And it's unfortunately becoming a hot topic. And Kesha writes a very, very emotional, public outcry that, hey, I'm trying to get out of my contract. I'm not only am a victim of abuse, which is a very serious thing, but I'm also a victim of this, lopsided contract and being stuck to my abuser. I mean, that's a pretty significant argument, right? Kelly Clarkson offers more support to Kesha. And, she says that she was also blackmailed by her record label, which was a Sony subsidiary, and that she was, blackmailed into working with Dr. Luke on Since You've Been Gone. And Since You've Been Gone was Kelly Clarkson's, like, if anybody asked me to name a song from Kelly Clarkson, that's the song I would name. So this is a pretty significant allegation, right? She described him, Kelly Clarkson said he's not a good guy. She doesn't say anything more. Okay, she doesn't say anything more about the sexual allegations part. Finally, Kesha appealed in 2016 the decision denying her injunction to preclude the contract with Dr. Luke from going forward, right? Even though she says that this is essentially slavery, to work for a company that is abusive, that was abusive to her, and that she wants nothing to do with it, judge didn't buy it, unfortunately. Then Kesha, again, we're assuming that this is true. We don't know if it is as of today. But she publishes on Twitter that Dr. Luke offered her a deal. This is in 2016. Offered her a deal to release her from her contract if she says that the rape allegations were false, that they were made up. That's pretty nasty if that's true. We don't know if it's true, but that's what her position was. That's what she said publicly back in 2016. After quite a while, apparently in 2016, it's been 2 years at that point since she started her lawsuit. She dropped her California abuse lawsuit against Dr. Luke. And she publishes, or, she produces, writes, records 28 songs for her label. Imagine you're trying to sue to get out of a relationship, a business relationship. And it's not just limited to a business relationship. There are allegations of sexual and physical abuse. And you have to produce music and work for this person or company. That's a horrible position to be in. That's her argument this whole time. But I'm just trying to think through this, and that's a horrible thing that you would have to do. It's torture, essentially. Anyway, so fast forward to 2017, Dr. Luke then threatened to sue Kesha for defamation over a text, and that's where we get the litigation with the ruling that we just had last week from an appellate court in New York. And we'll talk about that in a second. But basically, Dr. Luke sues because he discovers that there's a text message that she sent to Lady Gaga, where, and this is immediately after she loses her injunction lawsuit, she sends a text message to Lady Gaga saying that Dr. Luke also abused Katy Perry. That's the bombshell that launches the defamation lawsuit by Dr. Luke. Okay, so again, if you're already caught in the crosshairs of confusion, don't be surprised, because this is long and winded, and it is absolutely crazy story. I had no idea it was this deep. Anyway, so in 2017, a judge then kind of kicked out her countersuit against Dr. Luke, where she is again trying for a third time. Right, she's trying for a third time now to get out of the contract using legal crowbars, and she's just not able to do it. Apparently, the judge had some pretty harsh words, and let me see if I can find a quote for you. Judge said, with respect to the prescription agreement, which is her music contract, signed in November 2008, Gottwald, who's Dr. Luke, Gottwald's alleged abusive behavior was foreseeable. It was foreseeable. You can only sue for negligence if it's an unforeseeable, if it's foreseeable and you could have avoided it, then you kind of have some fault here. I think that's what the judge was getting at. I haven't read the complete order, admittedly, so I'm not sure. But basically, a judge shoots down her ability to use California laws relating to labor and employment, and basically saying that terminating your contract 7 years after the deal, just because of lawsuits in New York, is not going to work out for you. That's basically what a judge said. So anyway, lots of things happened in 2017. I won't bore you with the details. But basically, there's subpoenas to get these text messages between Lady Gaga and Kesha. And initially, they're heavily redacted. Finally, when they're unredacted, we get this sort of jaw-dropping allegations of sexual abuse that Kesha has published. And it's very, very clear that, Kesha is saying that Luke raped Katy Perry. That's her allegation. That's what's landing her in the hot water with this defamation lawsuit. Here is the problem. In addition remember we talked about this 2011 deposition. We talked about this 2011 deposition that Kesha was in. She testifies that Dr. Luke did not abuse her. And of course she argues after the fact that, she felt coerced and she feared for her safety, and she ultimately was in a record deal with this guy, and she felt compelled. Well, as to the allegation that Dr. Luke sexually abused Katy Perry also, unfortunately, Katy Perry herself says this is false. Ouch. So now that's teetering on the edge of smelling bad, right? At the very least, to say it nicely. And that it's completely outrageous and reprehensible, as Dr. Luke's legal team has put it. Anyway, there's kind of an interesting dynamic here called the Streisand Effect. For those of you who are unfamiliar with how defamation lawsuits work, sometimes when you publish the statements that are being made about you that are false and harmful, when you publish them by bringing a lawsuit, you make matters worse, right? Meaning you echo those false statements. You make them more well-known, perhaps arguably, than they were before the defamation lawsuit. That's called the Streisand Effect. And so, Kesha's lawyers are arguing that, listen, by bringing a lawsuit on this, at one point this was purely a text message between Kesha and Lady Gaga. By virtue of the fact that you're attaching now an unredacted text message where somebody's accusing you of being an abuser, you brought the whole world's attention on this. Now, the caveat to that is we don't know who else Kesha published this false information to. As a matter of defamation law, all you need to do is publish a false statement to another person. Okay, assuming it's not privileged and it's not, protected speech. But publishing it to one person is sufficient to trigger a defamation lawsuit. It doesn't have to be to the world. It doesn't have to be to two people. One other person other than you. Okay? Of course, you'd have to prove what damages stem from that. Hold that thought for a second. Anyway, so we get all these depositions records released that were sealed. We get these, Katy Perry's testimony. We've got Kesha's testimony from prior lawsuits. We've got text messages now that are coming out. And it's devastating to Kesha's case, unfortunately, for her. And, you kind of fast forward to 2019, and, she's really doubling down that she has PTSD. And yet she still has to record songs throughout this entire process. That's got to be like pulling teeth, right? And so she's writing hit songs during 2019. Again, according to her, she's compelled to because she's got a contract, but she's making money for her abuser. Now we get to 2020. In 2020, Kesha's lawsuit in New York takes a significant hit. Why does it take a significant hit? It takes a significant hit because a judge basically rules, based on the testimony of Katy Perry and the evidence before the record, that Kesha made a false statement. Her publication that Dr. Luke that Dr. Luke raped Katy Perry is false. Katy Perry has said that this is false. There's no controverting evidence other than perhaps Kesha herself. And so, and moreover, under defamation laws in essentially every jurisdiction, we have what's called defamation per se. And when you allege that somebody committed a crime, particularly rape, it's defamation per se, which means you don't have to prove damages as part of your claim. Your lawsuit can get to a jury without you putting numbers against your claim. Right? And so the judge says this is defamation per se. And there's no evidence that Dr. Luke raped Katy Perry. And that's enough to impose liability, clean and simple. And then relating to her contract claim, remember in New York there's also this contract claim Katy Perry's making. Dr. Luke prevails on the breach portion, and a judge orders that she have to pay him $373,000, I think is a dollar amount, in royalties. And that's the ruling that was appealed. That's the ruling that was appealed, and we're kind of waiting on some sort of resolution on that until now, right? And so Kesha's lawyers file in Manhattan Supreme Court, in a New York Supreme Court in Manhattan, basically saying that, look, there is a new law that was passed in New York, the anti-SLAPP statute. Anti-SLAPP statutes, in a nutshell, are designed, the intent of the statute is to get rid of very early on, without getting into discovery usually, and puts the entire case on pause until the motion is ruled, that this case lacks merit, either because the speech is protected speech or it was brought without merit for the following reasons. And the statute typically lists out what the anti-SLAPP bases are. And that, the person who brought the plaintiff who's suing for defamation should get hit with legal fees if it's determined by the court that the statements are, in fact, protected under the anti-SLAPP statute. So very, very far away from a trial, very, very short from most of the, procedural aspects of a case. The case can get kicked. It's basically they lose that anti-SLAPP motion. And a New York Court of Appeals basically says, sorry, Dr. Luke is not a public figure. Let's talk about why that's important. So Kesha's team is arguing that Dr. Luke was a public figure during the time of these allegations. As a plaintiff who is a public figure, here's why that's significant. You have to then prove a higher burden. You have more significant evidence that you have to show in order to win your defamation case. If you are a public figure, you have to prove malice. You have to prove that the publisher made statements with reckless disregard for the truth, or did it intentionally, right? Made publications of false statements intentionally. The simple negligence standard no longer applies. So instead of, I'm sorry I made a mistake, you have to actually show that this person really knew what they were saying was false, or that they at least had serious doubts as to whether what they were stating to somebody else was truthful or not. And that is a more difficult standard. It's difficult because rarely do you have proof of reckless disregard for the truth. It's usually circumstantial evidence in most of the cases that I've handled, and you have to convince a judge or jury that there's sufficient evidence there, a fact finder, that you meet that requirement, and it's not easy to do. So Kesha loses that defensive point that she was trying to put up on the board there, which decreases the standard back to negligence. So now you have Dr. Luce gaining traction. Remember, he wins the defamation per se. The judge has already ruled that she's published a defamatory statement, specifically with respect to telling Lady Gaga that he abused Katy Perry. Judge has already ruled that that was false and it was defamation per se. The appeal now from the anti-SLAPP statute, related to the anti-SLAPP statute, is lost. So she's losing big time. Now the only thing really to show is damages. Damages, or, the connection between the statement and the damages, I should say. Because in a defamation per se lawsuit, again, depending on how much you're seeking, he's seeking $50 million for reputational harm. $50 million for reputational harm. Let's not forget, that is a huge number. On top of the fact that it's not looking good because people, specifically Katy Perry, has come out and said, this is bogus. He never assaulted me. I don't know. If I'm Kesha's legal team, I would try to split up these contract issues, if you can at this point, and the defamation case, because she has significant risk here. And New York has some tough defamation laws, meaning it's not plaintiff-friendly. New York is not a plaintiff-friendly jurisdiction to be in, because there are laws that protect journalists, there are laws that protect media people, there are laws that protect, that make it difficult for plaintiffs to prevail against public figures. But at this point, Dr. Luke is not a public figure. So let's talk about this. Why would he not be a public figure? Isn't he a celebrity? So, the Court of Appeals two of seven judges dissented. They opposed the view and said, look, this guy is a household name as it relates to, I don't think they use the word household name, by the way, but I think they said this guy is a celebrity. He's a known person in the record industry. Of course, he's a public figure. At the very least, he's what we call a limited purpose public figure. For the purposes of this lawsuit and the allegations, he should be deemed a public figure. The other five judges disagree. And I think those five judges actually made the right ruling. Because the idea is the plaintiff specifically relating to the subject matter of the allegations? The subject matter of the allegations is sexual abuse against an artist. For purposes of that issue, is Dr. Luke a public figure? You could argue that he's a limited purpose public figure in the world of entertainment and in the world of, recording and promoting female artists. But that's not the issue in dispute in this defamation case. That's the nuance there. And it is a tough nuance to understand. But that's what the judges quite confidently have stated in their opinion in stating that, yeah, he is not a public figure or a limited purpose public figure because he did not purposefully, there's kind of two reasons for that. He didn't inject himself into any public debate on this topic, okay? Number one. Number two, he is not a household name, and he is not someone who is out promoting or talking about sexual abuse. It's kind of like this. If you are out and you are promoting heavily a particular topic, you are on the news, you're writing articles about a specific topic, perhaps relating to you. Let's say there's a cardiovascular surgeon who is blasting on the news, on his YouTube channel, writing in highly publicized journals about his particular keto diet. Let's just take these facts. And most people in the diet and nutrition world have heard of this cardiologist, or, let's just assume that's true. For purposes of the topic of ketosis and his diet, I would argue he is a public figure. I think any judge would agree with that. But if he is suing a defendant, let's say for a defendant's statements about, let's say, a surgery that he committed, malpracticing, allegedly, and the doctor sues that defendant for defamation, would he be considered a public figure for purposes of that litigation? I would argue that the doctor who's talking about diet and nutrition is not a public figure for purposes of his private clinical work, which is what the malpractice claim relates to, right? And the logic behind the law is, listen, if you are out and you have a big mouth and you're putting all these issues, these topics out there, injecting yourself into public debate is the language that we see in case law, then people deserve to criticize you, and mere negligence is not enough. Meaning, if I'm criticizing somebody who is a public figure, you can't sue me if I'm just wrong, negligently incorrect. I made a mistake. I didn't do enough research. Oops. It makes sense that the law would require that I have a little bit of a motive, that I have, reckless disregard for the truth, that I'm just out here purporting fact, maybe even purposefully or intentionally, that I had facts in my pocket that I knew were contrary to what I was saying. It makes sense because of the topic being, a topic for public debate. That's the rationale. And so I tend to agree with the ruling. I think this case is getting more and more difficult for Kesha. I think that there's real trial risk here. It's going to be interesting to see what happens. We're going to follow this case really closely, and I don't know if there's a trial date yet. If somebody knows, they can post it below. Maybe we'll do an update posting it. But I think Kesha, unfortunately, has an uphill battle. And the saddest part about this is, if in fact these allegations are true, right? Sexual abuse is one of the worst things, particularly in the record industry, and we know in the entertainment world. Period. We know there are people like this who have done these kinds of things and gotten busted, but only after many, 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 many years. Harvey Weinstein is one such example. He's a convicted felon. He's doing time. There were stories of abuse. You could argue that people didn't come forward as early on as Kesha did. But even Kesha, again, according to what we know in the rulings, didn't come out about her abuse until 2014 when she was checked into a rehab facility, and she even testified in 2011 that Dr. Luke never made advances against her. But again, her argument is, I was pressured into giving that testimony, and I had a contract controlling my livelihood. So really, really interesting case. Lots of dicey issues. Let us know if you have any questions about Kesha's case, the ruling about Dr. Luke not being a public figure, what defamation per se is, and how you think this is going to go. But we'd love to hear from you. You can drop it in the comments to this video, or you can send us a DM, and we're happy to answer it. Thank you for listening again. And if you have any suggestions for topics, definitely let us know. Until next time, Rais Muhammad. We'll catch you again.